Biff Bam Pow, this is Screen Watching.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television, teacher, mother, secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for it.
Streaming this podcast at you from the Always Be Watching Screen Watching lair. My name's Dan Barrett. I'm joined, as always, by my boy wonder. It's Simon Foster.
Hello, Batman. It's good to be here. I'm very excited about this week's show because we are talking all things Batman, which is right in your ballpark. The new Batman movie is in cinemas. We've both been able to check it out, and it's I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, so you mentioned last week on the podcast, this is right in my ballpark, but there's probably people who don't really understand exactly why that's the case. And just to explain to people, a couple of years ago, I was working at SBS. The opportunity came up to indulge in a bit of a quiet fantasy I always had, but I never really let people know. I didn't let it betray my cool exterior. But the question came up saying, hey, Dan, we've got the 1966 Batman TV show debuting on SBS Viceland in a couple of months' time. Do you want to host a Batman-related podcast? At that point, we had to change the ventilation in the building because my hat flew right off my head. But I played it really cool. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like something I'd be interested in.
Yep.
Biff Bam Pow, Batman Land was born just a short while later. And I went through every episode of the 60s Batman TV show, which was a dream of mine. I've obviously seen them all before as a kid, but hadn't seen them as an adult. And so, went through them, did a podcast about every episode. We had a whole bunch of interesting guests. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the number one guest I really wanted, one Burt Ward. He was elusive, and boy, did I try on that one a whole bunch of times. But we got to speak to some really interesting people about their Batman-related experiences.
Now, after you've listened to this special Batman edition of Screen Watching, might people be able to go and listen to the Batman SBS podcast? Is it still available on platforms?
Look, I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to find it. And it's called Batman Land. The only thing is that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you're watching the episodes along with it.
Sure.
So
yeah, that's possible to do.
Very much around the idea of like a communal watching of the show.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh well, that sounds like a wonderful idea to do, and it's and it was a great. I know it was a great podcast. My far better half played a part in it as well, which I always thought was funny because she didn't really know a lot about Batman, but she had a good time on air with you and the team. And this week
I was going to say, this is the thing with the old Batman TV show where, yes, we talked about Batman a bit, but what's great about the 60s Batman is it came at a time where you've got the changing of the guard and the culture. So if you watch the Batman TV show from the 60s, all the very special guest stars that are supposed to get the kids of the day excited are not like youth-orientated personalities by any means. If anything, the show had disdain for the young people of the time. Instead, they were just like stars of Hollywood's yesteryear that were in the twilight of their careers as they're going out doing guest roles on Batman. It was a really unique program because the entire reason that 60s Batman came to be, sorry kids, here's a history lesson.
Yeah, let's settle in everyone. This is the Batman episode of Screen Watching and it's begun.
So the way that the 60s Batman TV show came about was because through the very late 50s going into the early 60s, universities across the US embraced Batman as a bit of a underground pop cultural icon. Mm-hmm. And so if you'd go to any university campus, you'd find them doing regular screenings of the Batman serials from back in the day. And that'll have a drunken great time watching the old Batman show. That was taking place. And so the producers like Hollywood came calling going, wait a second, if the kids are interested in this and we're trying to get the kids watching, maybe we can bring Batman back. And they've very much had the Andy Warhol sort of pop art explosion happening at the time. So they kind of smashed ideas together. Lo and behold, 60s Batman. So I was originally aimed at the, 20 to 30 somethings that had just come out of university with the idea that we've got a show for them.
And while we're going off on tangents, I was very fortunate to have been at one of the late night screenings of the 1966 Batman movie when it was re-released in the mid-80s at the Hoyts Entertainment Centre here in Sydney. And I'm sure it played in Brisbane when you were a young man as well. And I was interviewed for what was then some sort of incarnation of the SBS movie show. And somewhere floating around is me commenting with great mirth on the Batman phenomenon. So this is Batman has been something that's been part of my sort of upbringing, certainly not to the extent knowledge that you're going to exhibit in the hour ahead. But I guess he's my favorite superhero or super entity, I guess you could say. So would he be up there? I know that you're mad on supes as well, but Batman's got to be up there.
Yeah, Superman's my number one guy, but look, I'm pretty keen on Batman. I've certainly put the hours in on Batman.
All right, so we're going to settle in for the Screen Watching Batman Special Edition podcast. There'll be other bits and pieces in there as well. We have got a new TV show that Dan will be looking at called Winning Time, but I think what we need to get to sooner rather than later is the Batman film review.
Indeed, because Simon, the one thing we didn't actually do is say there is a new movie out starring the aforementioned Batman. It's called The Batman, and it's playing in cinemas right now.
Fear is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning.
So Simon, the way I think we're going to approach this is that both of us have got reviews of some description sort of eked out. So I think you wanted me to go first. So I'm going to
you kick off, because you'll bring a level of sort of inner knowledge to this that I think will be a great way to kick off this discussion.
Look, I haven't really done that at all. Basically, look, here's the review I posted up on the Always Be Watching website. And it's a review, but also not really. It's a bit of it's more a mini essay, I guess. But let me run through this and we can run through what I've got here and then we'll do your review and then we'll go a bit broader. Okay. So the most interesting scene in The Batman takes place right near the start of the movie. The mayor's been murdered and Batman's visiting the crime scene. This is the sort of situation we've seen play out in countless Bat comics over the years, quite a number of the cartoons, and here and there a little bit in the movies. And the way this scene usually plays out is there's one or two cops around. It's usually after the cops have thoroughly investigated the situation and the investigation's winding down from the scene of the crime. But there's usually one or two cops around. Batman steps out of the shadows to have a chat with Commissioner Gordon, who's still around, because that's what we always find. Senior management stick around well after all the junior staff have gone. That never happens. But we're always left with a question. Batman, he's just stepped out of the shadow. Has he been there the whole time? How does he stay undetected for so long? And the audience is left wondering that. And that's how those play out. But that's not how it goes with the new Batman. We've got this scene where he enters through the front door with Commissioner Gordon. Sorry, not quite a commissioner yet. He's walking down a passageway that's lined with cops at the scene of the murder of the seemingly well-regarded mayor. The cops stare down menacingly at Batman. They don't want him there. The disdain is palpable. And it's also weird that this guy is there in this really bizarre suit. Now, this Batman, he's played by Robert Pattinson, and he's a weird guy. And he'd always have to be. What's great about the scene is it actually plays Batman as he would be in real life. He's an outsider, a bizarre oddity that makes all the normal folk uncomfortable when they see him. The Batman as a movie is strongest for the first third of the movie, which leans into Batman as dangerously weird. As an audience, as a director, what am I doing? I've got to learn how to read. As an audience, director Matt Reeves throws us off balance. We're introduced to Batman pretty early on, as he does Batman-y sort of things. But the expected iconography of Batman's been stripped away from this. He doesn't return home in a Batmobile. Here he strips off his costume before riding home on a motorcycle. His home isn't stately Wayne Manor, 14 miles out of Gotham. He's living in the middle of the road, run-down, dangerous Gotham City in a large Wayne family apartment building. His Batcave, if you can even call it that, it just seems to be a couple of IKEA tables and some dust. It's a hidden space that's behind a garage door that looks like a long-forgotten subway train station. And it kind of feels a little bit of a cross between New York Central Station and the lair from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze, a reference I'm sure we were all thinking of. Now, it's all very dark, it's creepy and unexpected. And that section of the film is it just rules. Like, that section of the film blew my hat off, the same hat I was wearing previously when the podcast was discussed. Where the film starts to get unstuck, though, is where the film starts trading its edge for more expected traditional Batman storytelling. They bring in Catwoman, who's the awesome Zoe Kravitz. You got Gotham's crime families and a plot that involves the narcotics trade in the city. And the film starts to get bogged down in the business of expected plot mechanics, and too often it forgets to revel in the weird. The 1984 Steve Martin comedy, The Lonely Guy. Yeah, did you see this reference coming, Simon?
Wow, I'm going with it, man. This is great.
Okay. The Lonely Guy introduced to cinemas the idea of weird guys. This is the notion that if a guy is single for too long, left to his own interests and devices, guys start to get weird. And this bears out in real life. It's never women with obscenely large comic book collections or women interested in model trains. It's always guys, weird guys. Now, when Patterson's Batman first meets Catwoman, he, and by extension the film itself, starts to get less weird. He starts to engage more with the world as it actually is and is seen more in the daylight, helping just average folks out. Counter this to Zodiac wannabe the Riddler, who's a terrorist who for most of the film is an unknown entity, but as the villain's unmasked, it reveals the actor Paul Dano, and he isn't just seen to be a weird guy, he's incel weird. And what more, he spends time talking online to like-minded weird guys, and it culminates with Batman, now far less weird, taking on an incel army. Nobody going into Batman expects the film to serve as a remake of The Lonely Guy, but 2022 has proven to be full of surprises. Now, audiences leaving the Batman will be exhausted, but also disappointed, and I think unfairly so. The film's so strong and confident in its youthful, fuck-it-all energy right at the beginning of the film, with Matt Reeves clearly keen to have his Batman grow up on screen. The film takes place over just a week, but the Batman who emerges at the end of the movie is a Batman who stepped out of the darkness. While that makes for a satisfying arc, it does create a Batman in a Gotham City that's less scary and oppressively dark than where we entered the story. And in doing that, it strips the film of what actually felt so fresh and vibrant about the movie in its opening act. We say a too soon goodbye to the hero that this city deserves, which it turns out happens to be a creepy, weird guy.
Great analysis of the film, Dan. I think the key players in the Batman story are Robert Pattinson. I think, as you point out, it's extraordinarily important that our Batman in 2022 is a twisted, grief-ridden outcast from society. He is struggling with so much that's gone on before him, the real horrors of his life, the murder of his parents, the complexities of the crime and corruption that's going on in the city, and how he himself is a part of that as a vigilante force, are all captured in a terrific performance by Pattinson. I would argue a little bit that the sort of convoluted crime and corruption plotting that sees actors like John Turturro and a completely unrecognizable Colin Farrell play into those sort of dark underworld beats isn't particularly exciting. This is more a story about the personalities and the dark corners of the mind that all these different people are meant to go into to move ahead in this horrible above ground underworld existence. And as Catwoman, I agree that the film is both made a little bit better by her introduction. She, I think, is arguably the strongest Catwoman since my favorite Michelle Pfeiffer back in the Tim Burton days. Exactly. But also it is sort of the beginning of the softening of the edge that Batman has that makes the first half of the film, as you say, so compelling and interesting. It's such a dark and grimy film. You can feel the texture, you can feel the smoke haze and the wet, the streets, the incredible car chase sequence that is all shot in driving rain. Looks amazing. Matt Reeves has a genuine eye for that kind of action and that kind of sort of crafting images on screen. It's too long for me at 177 minutes. I thought it began to...
Too long for me as well.
Yeah, it really was. Like, there were moments, and I think you very wittily said when you come out of the screening, send me an emoji review. My second emoji was kind of a head on my fist resting thing, because the middle section of the film sort of dragged for me. But it's a major work and an extraordinary sort of film for a major studio to make, because it does go so dark in so many places. And the point you make about Paul Dano's Riddler being an incel psychopath is totally right. So, so there's, just before we recorded this, the first story came out from Variety saying, is the Batman the first serious 2023 Oscar contender? It probably is in many categories. There's a long road to go down before we get there, but it's a growing up version of the Batman story that I don't know if is going to sit well with multiple viewings or repeat audiences. So I'm keen to see where this finishes up at the box office.
Yeah, look, I think that this film will resonate so much better with audiences than I think it has with some critics. the one theme I noticed through a lot of reviews, and Simon, I know that you feel this as well, which is just burnout of superhero movies. People are just a little bit over with it. And so like it launched with a pretty strong 90% on Rotten Tomatoes from what I saw like a day or two ago when the first reviews dropped. I don't know where it's sitting now, but like to me, the 10% is really a lot of people who are just burned out by it's just superhero fatigue. And fair enough if you're not entirely into it, but it seems like there's an insatiable appetite amongst audiences for this. You look at the only movies that are actually getting much play in the box office, and it is just superhero films. Spider-Man did amazing. This is set to do some pretty amazing box office from all projections. So I don't know, audiences, I think, are going to be here for this. And it's definitely a much darker movie than we've seen from any other Batman film until the States.
For sure.
Murky as. And I have to say, the Gotham City in this, I thought was incredibly compelling. But it comes off the back of the Joker movie from, 3 years ago now, maybe even 4 years. And while that film certainly, I think it had its pleasures, and there were certainly things that were very strong about it, as well as a few things that were just a bit nutty and just a bit sort of, just not very good.
Indulgent.
Just in terms of like, they just didn't really quite think through what the Joker character is and how he operates amongst the rest of the city. The amazing thing that film did was a Gotham City that felt just completely like the world had given up on it. Like it felt so dirty, so grimy. And as grimy as this movie is, Simon, I still don't think it's a patch on what they did on that Joker film. That was really quite impressive, the way they just showed that to be such a dangerous place.
Yeah, I think the setting for the Joker was the outwardly the city collapsed as his mental state was collapsing as well. So as Joaquin Phoenix's lead character became increasingly unhinged, so did the streets of Gotham. So yeah, you're totally right. I think
a complete place.
Yeah, exactly. There are sequences in this. Matt Reeves' camera goes in very tight on some moments. There's a lot of really intense close-ups, very sort of condensed action sequences. The sequence in the police questioning room when Batman wakes up after an incident. We weren't going to give anything away, so I won't say anything more. But
we are going to keep this as spoiler-free-ish as we can. So if you haven't seen the film yet, you can feel confident that we're not going to really sort of ruin anything for you that's of consequence. But at the same time, I think we're not necessarily going to skirt around things too much.
Yeah. So he has certainly made the Batman story his own, in the same way that, for good or for worse, Tim Burton did, and Joel Schumacher did, and Christopher Nolan did. I think this is a Batman for a new generation and speaks to some disconnect amongst younger people and some sense of inevitable nihilism in the world in which they live. Like I say, I don't know if that's going to relate to box office dollars, but I'm just concerned it's going to be one of those movies where it has $100 million opening weekend and then gets a 70, hits the 70% drop-off point, which is what makes headlines in Hollywood. I hope it isn't, but I think there's every chance that it could be. But that's just me. So I think we're generally giving a thumbs up to the Batman.
Yeah, look, I mean, the only thing that really sort of stops me from when he gets super enthusiastic is just that runtime. So I sat there, I was actually sitting next to a guy who, wait for this, Simon, runs a comic book store. But no, like I just bumped into him when I was in the cinema, and so I just found myself sitting next to him. But like he also just kind of felt that it was just a little bit too long, and it was definitely like all of us just felt a little bit punished by just how like long the film had run for. And it didn't help that for some reason my watch, which is connected to the internet, for some reason added an extra hour on, like I thought it was in Sydney when instead we're in Brisbane and the hour's different. So I actually thought we were like 2 hours in at the hour mark. So by the time I hit the end, I'm like, is this close to a 4-hour movie?
Wow.
So like it just changed my perception as to what I was watching entirely. And like, that's probably a bit unfair. Like it felt so much longer than it was because I had the reality of the time, but that was a fake reality anyway. So I don't know what I'm doing there.
I must point out, I must say, I've had a number of very in-depth discussions with some of the critics and some of the people who were at the screening that I went to. And I'm glad that a Hollywood superhero action blockbuster decides to go to these darker, more interesting psychological places. Nolan did to a certain extent, and Matt Reeves. And
Nolan's Batman, though, was still like a James Bond character.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Batman.
Yeah, no, exactly right. He was still a billionaire doing billionaire things. So, and although that's touched on in this film, there's a much more interesting side to Batman and to Catwoman that we see in the roles that they play. So, I'm thankful for at least a smart, challenging, psychologically punishing portrayal of this character who has always been about grief and vengeance and all those horrible things that we sometimes and very often associate with villains in movies.
Where I think the film's maybe made a mistake in terms of audience connection to it is that it set us up from the very beginning a really interesting relationship between Batman and the police. Now, we've seen these sorts of relationships depicted on screen before. It's very similar to if people saw the 1991 animated film Mask of the Phantasm, which up until now probably has been the best Batman film released to cinemas. I think this is better. But like that showed very much the contentious nature at times that Batman's had with the police. Like that to me really speaks to the moment that we're all living in, where the youth of America particularly are very sort of rabid, anti-police. And so you sort of look at this Batman who really seems almost like a countercultural figure in the sense that he really represents that youth ideal, and the police aren't interested in him. And it actually feels like a real generational sort of split happening, which it seems like the film trades it off halfway through to be less interested in that from a police perspective, and instead shifts that generational split to the boss Maroney. Sorry, I was about to say something which is a bit of a spoiler for the film, so I'm going to avoid that. Yeah, the Maroney character. And so he suddenly becomes the voice of the prior generation. And one of the themes of this film is sins of the father being sort of, passed on to the son. Yeah. And Maroney really just sort of spoke to that and was the embodiment of that sort of prior generation and all the privilege and wealth and just benefit that they had to society that they've sort of sucked up for themselves. And it felt like it was in the police's hands originally and then moved to like this crime figure where I think it would have been so much stronger if Batman never really actually forms that bond with the police so early in. And by the end of the film is just as much of a anti-hero as far as the police are concerned as he was at the beginning of the film. I want to see that contentious relationship, and it was just annihilated by the end. The cops were Team Batman very much at the end of the film.
They sure were. The points you make about it being very much for a younger generation are backed up by the use of technology in the film, phones and handheld devices.
But also undone because the hip music being played is a Nirvana track that gets played about 3 times through it.
The kids love Nirvana. What are you talking about? And Riddler's character, so much of Paul Dano's performance is either behind the leather mask that he wears that we've seen in the trailer, or via his handheld device, his phone, which takes up a big chunk of the film, but is used very well. So I'm happy that the Batman is finally here after long delays. I'm certainly happy with Pattinson in the lead role. And Matt Reeves continues to exhibit a smart take on blockbuster filmmaking that makes him arguably the most interesting commercial director in Hollywood at the moment.
Yeah. Now, Matt Reeves, I think he's starting to get a little bit of recognizability. That's not the word I'm after. Yeah, one day I'll get there. But like he's starting to get a little bit of credit around the place, but I still don't think he's really a household name. So if you don't know Matt Reeves, he's the guy that directed Cloverfield. He directed the most 2 recent Planet of the Apes movies, which were both exceptionally good.
Yes.
Worth noting there, the carryover actor being Andy Serkis. So Andy Serkis had performed Gollum in the Lord of the Rings films. And so they needed a mocap actor to be able to play the Caesar ape character, the lead ape in Planet of the Apes. So he very much took on those roles, and like really just amazing performances coming from Serkis. Here he's playing the Alfred character in a role which he's not as present as I really expected. I thought he'd be in a lot more of this film.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. He's very good. I think all the acting is very good. I think that we can go past the cast without mentioning Jeffrey Wright as, did you say Captain Gordon? He's a captain in this?
I think he's captain at this point. He never becomes captain in this film.
And he has an increased part than what I've seen in other movies. So he's very good. He sort of is the bridge between the angry cops who just see Batman as a vigilante and Batman himself and what he's trying to achieve. He takes on a little bit of the Alfred part in much of this. He sort of takes on Batman's guardian angel type roles. So much good acting in this. This is a quality.
It's almost a big brother character to a certain degree. But what's weird about, well, I guess maybe what's interesting about the Jeffrey Wright performance is that his Commissioner Gordon isn't a mature man. Like he's certainly on the side of right, but he's very youthful in a lot of his turns of phrase and just general demeanor around the place. Like he's a serious person, but also he's still an approachable human being in a way that Commissioner Gordon in the past has always been shown as sort of a man of authority and at a little bit of a distance from his humanity.
Yeah, I think you're right. Listen, can you recall watching a 3-hour movie that had not a single laugh in it? Did you laugh at all? I mean, obviously, there's Schindler's List, of course, and stuff like that. The Exorcist, you don't want
my side, just thinking about that film.
You're not going to giggle about. But for a major Hollywood film to go all 3 hours, and I was, not stony faced, I was invested. But it's a pretty dour journey for big parts of it. Yeah.
Look, the big question I had through the film, and this is a question I had going into it, so it suddenly didn't surprise me that I was still thinking about this mid-film, is why is Colin Farrell in this movie?
What you mean? Why didn't they just get some other fat guy actor to play the part?
Yeah, like why not find a character actor who looks exactly like the mountains of latex that Colin Farrell has put on, who's got the same accent that Colin Farrell is affecting while he's in there? Like this, like obviously it's Colin Farrell, but it's not a Colin Farrell performance. Yeah, Nobody's seen Colin Farrell in this. He's completely unrecognizable.
He went full Jared Leto in this role. He just went right under the whole sort of mask and everything in much the way that Jared Leto did for his Razzie-nominated performance in House of Gucci, which I also watched during the week and which is terrible. But we'll get back to that.
Colin Farrell walking around is like, that's a pizza pie.
All right, so as we do the vaguely racist impersonations towards the end of this review, I think we've reached the end of our The Batman review. It's not the end of Batman as far as screen watching is concerned, though. We have got a middle bit where we run through our favorite Batman moments. But before that, Dan, I think you've got something else to chat about.
Yeah, well, both of us. So we didn't necessarily just want this to be a Batman oriented. Entirely, we've got other stuff to discuss. So there's actually a fairly big TV series being released this week, and I'm not doing a full review, but I did want to talk briefly about Winning Time. So this is the latest series from Adam McKay. It feels very much like his other biopic productions, with characters addressing the camera, sometimes mid-scene with a wry, knowing sense of humor to it all. Like it feels exactly the same as the other Adam McKay joints. This show, it focuses on the LA Lakers during the early 80s when the real estate investment guy Jerry Buss bought the LA Lakers. So it's in an era where he supercharged the team with not only great players, the likes of Magic Johnson, for example, but he also stimulated a stronger sense of entertainment, showmanship, and a superstar status to the game. So basketball by the end of the 80s was in a very different place in terms of the cultural psyche around it than it was before Jerry Buss got involved. And the show, it's perfectly entertaining. I wasn't really blown away by it though. But there is one scene in its time that you need to watch the first episode of this to be able to witness, because it is an incredible scene that, strip it away from this show, holds up perfectly fine, will entertain you just as much. It's the scene that shows Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's a beloved basketballer at the time, but you and I, Simon, probably know him best from his scene in a movie Airplane, aka Flying High, as we call it here in Australia. The scene takes place, the filming of him filming one of his scenes where he's talking to that young kid who's in the cockpit with him. And you get to see him trying to work his way through that scene where he's being diminished by the kid about his basketball playing ability. But, he's faking that he's actually a pilot until he sort of snaps at the kid. So it's that scene. And then you see what takes place afterwards when the kid comes up saying, I really am a big fan of your work. And I don't want to tell you what happens there, Simon, but my God, it got a very loud laugh out of me. And that was by far the most entertaining thing I've seen from a couple of episodes of the show. It's a stellar scene. If nothing else, watch it.
Well, I'm keen to check that out. A, for that little moment that you just described him, because that sounds hilarious. But also, I wasn't on the anti-Adam McKay Don't Look Up bandwagon. I liked Don't Look Up, and I like most of the things Adam McKay does. He has certainly weighed into the nuttier side of basketball before with, was it called Semi-Pro, the thing he did with Will Ferrell? I think he was one of the writers and producers on that a few years back. So, I'm all on board for this. And this is a period, 80s nostalgia and craziness and money being wasted and flaunted and abused is the kind of genre sort of filmmaking I love to watch. So, I'm on board for this. Winning Time, where's it screening?
So it'll be streaming in Australia on Binge, and in the US, it's an HBO Max program. But just, I guess, maybe just sort of worth noting, there's a whole bunch of really interesting guest stars and actors that appear throughout this. So you'll be spending just as much time going, wait a sec, who's that? And then working out who's under the wig, and off you go. Adam McKay, though, I think I'm just a little bit tired of his presentation style. And so that's probably where I think this diminished a little bit for me.
All right. I want to mention also in cinemas this week, talk about counter programming. Boy, this is a little Aussie film called Ruby's Choice. It's a very sweet, poignant tale that follows 3 generations of Australian women. Secrets from the family's past are revealed as Ruby, played by the wonderful Jane Seymour, who came to Australia after reading the script. She's suffering from dementia. It threatens to push the family apart. All the screenings of Ruby's Choice will support dementia care with a portion of its profits. Jane Seymour, Jacqueline McKenzie, and the wonderful Coco Jack Kelly's stars of the Coco Jack Gillies, I should say, star as the 3 generations of women in this. Oh boy, got my tongue caught in my eye tooth. Couldn't see what I was saying.
Embarrassed about you.
Yeah, I know. Ruby's Choice in limited release as we speak. It's the stuff that's on at the movies that isn't the Batman.
Simon, I thought maybe we should move on. Yeah, just see the little sting I put in there.
I like that. That's good. That's production value.
It really is. So, conversation about the Batman, it is not ending. So, Simon, something that you proposed to me was the idea that we take a look at Batman as a broader pop culture character. Yeah. And I think you particularly want us to focus on your 5 favorite moments of Batman.
Yes, as podcasting's dynamic duo, I do want to present the Bat-ACULAR Middle Bit. This is our 5 favorite Caped Crusader moments. We look back at moments from any media form, whether it's comic books or the cartoons, that TV series, any of the movies, any of the things that really sort of jump out at us as being classic moments in the Batman's very extensive history. I think he's upwards of 80 years old at the moment, so he's doing all right. Do you want to go back and forth on this one? How do you want to do this?
Yeah, let's go back and forth. I think that's probably the way to do it. Before we get into the best moments, Simon, something that we never really addressed in terms of the Batman, there's been a lot of conversation about, is the Batman the best depiction of Batman so far on screen? Like, is it the best Batman movie? And I was wondering, do you think that way? Like, if it isn't this film, like, what film do you think is the best Batman movie?
I think it's maybe the most ambitious, and I think maybe it's the most complex, and they're certainly high points for me. It's right up there near the top of versions of the Batman movie. I think for me, the best Batman movie, and I'll touch on this in one of my 5 coming up soon, is the Tim Burton sequel, the one that introduced
Batman Returns.
Yeah, Batman Returns. So that's probably, I think, the standout Batman movie for me.
Yeah. So look, I go back and forth on this a little bit. So prior to me seeing the new film, I probably would have said that it's either Batman Returns or The Dark Knight, which I just think is an exceptional film.
Sure.
It's not really a Batman movie. Like, it really does feel like a James Bond movie where he just puts on a funny outfit.
They should do that. They'll start doing that. There'll be crossovers where James Bond starts wearing the big ears and the Batcape. That'd be fun.
I'm not against that. And I mentioned this one earlier in the podcast as well. There's an animated movie called Mask of the Phantasm, and that runs a pretty brisk sort of about 75 minutes-ish. But that one, if you've never seen it, like, it's a really great little...
Did that go to the movies, did it? I remember that as being a huge VHS title.
Well, what happened originally was the Batman animated series launched in, I'm going to say 91, 92, and became a massive success, like an unprecedented success for them. So they came up with the idea they were going to do an animated feature, but they were just going to release it as like a VHS thing that'd sell for like 20, 30 bucks and make some money over Christmas. But then they saw what they had there, and they're like, wait, we could probably actually play this in cinemas. Okay. So they changed the home video release strategy to include cinemas. And I think it played in cinemas in the US, but maybe just played home video here in Australia.
Oh, I remember it, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it's certainly played cinemas in the US, and yeah, like, it's really very good.
Would that be available? Would that be available on any of the DC streaming platforms? Where is that at the moment? That's on HBO Max, isn't it? But
HBO Max in the US. In Australia, a lot of that's on Binge. I'm just looking up to see if...
Well, yeah, of course. Maybe it is on Binge. So
anyway. Entirely possible. But yeah, I just want to say the Batman, I'm actually thinking it's actually in that list now. So the only thing that's a strike against is just that runtime.
Yep, all of that. I agree with all of that. Absolutely, it's in the top bunch for me. Just as a piece of filmmaking, it's a terrific piece of entertainment. So, all right, so we're in.
Good thing.
Yeah, we're into the Batman the BAT-ACULAR middle bit, as I'm calling it, our 5 favorite moments from the cultural icon, the pop culture king that is Batman. You're going to kick things off. Where are we, Dan?
Okay, I can confirm that the Batman Mask of the Phantasm, not on Binge.
Okay.
Yeah, but this story updates. I'll see where I can find it in a moment. Okay, so we were going to talk about our 5 favorite moments, and you sort of put it across comics, TV, film. I kept it purely on screen because the comic stuff gets a bit niche, I think. So I'm going to avoid that. But I can probably give a short list of the best sort of Batman comics to just reach out for if people want to find something, if they're inspired.
Whatever you want to do, Mr. Batman.
So look, we'll get to that in a moment. But the 5 favorite moments I've got from Batman depictions on screen, I'm going to kick things off with probably my favorite, which is this amazing scene from the 60s Batman TV show where he's facing off against Julie Newmar. Now, who's your favorite Catwoman?
I'll get to that. Move on. You're treading on my number. You're treading on my number 1 bit. So go.
Okay, we're going to have to get back to this. To my taste, Julie Newmar, absolutely the best Catwoman. I used to believe it was Michelle Pfeiffer, but then when I did this rewatch of the 60s Batman for Batman Land, like that changed my perception entirely. Julie Newmar is a fantastic, unhinged, just crazy performance.
Yeah.
People think about the old Batman show and think about like the crazy performance of like Cesar Romero as the Joker. That is actually not that crazy a performance. That's a very traditional, kind of dull performance to a certain degree. He's just got like a fun voice about him.
Yeah.
But like the performance Julie Newmar puts in as Catwoman is by far one of the best Bat performances you'll see across any medium. Like it is just incredible. But I wanted to play this scene because it makes me laugh so much. I think it's from the very first like 2-parter with Catwoman in it. And it ends with Batman chasing Catwoman across like some rooftops and side areas around like a pier. Anyway, he's followed Catwoman to the edge of the pier as she's about to sort of hang off the edge. And it's basically one of these things where he kind of needs to reach out and save her. And so they have a conversation. I've got some audio of it.
It's all over, Catwoman.
I could swim for it.
You'd never survive the fall. It's at least 100 feet down into the West River.
Anything's better than facing prison again.
I'll do everything I can to rehabilitate you.
Marry me.
Everything except that. A wife, no matter how beauteous or affectionate, would severely impair my crime fighting.
But I can help you in your work. As a former criminal, I'd be invaluable. I can reform. Honestly, I can.
What about Robin?
Robin? Oh, I've got it. We'll kill him.
I see you're not really ready to assume a life in society.
I guess you're right, Batman. Can't teach an old cat new tricks.
And then she dives off into the water, never to be seen until the next time she's back.
Okay, so you went with Julie Newmar. You got anything else to say? Because I'll jump into my Catwoman bit.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so for me, Michelle Pfeiffer as Selena Kyle Catwoman is the pinnacle of Catwoman idiosyncrasies. She makes the biggest leap from the very petite, very downtrodden Selena Kyle character into the self-reliant Catwoman. There's so many. In fact, look, I would say that Catwoman is my favorite character in the Batman universe because of that ambiguity, because of the will she, won't she, does she, doesn't she sort of moment that comes up in that clip that you played then. There's always that tension between the crime fighter and the criminal, and the man and the woman that are Batman and Catwoman, and that's played up really well between Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson in the latest film as well. I think they have a definitely the most interesting interactions on screen. But Michelle Pfeiffer for me was and is the epitome of strong, sexual, adventurous, fear-nothing womanhood that Catwoman represents. And in the hands of Tim Burton, who was maturing as a filmmaker by the time Batman Returns came around, all the silliness of his first film had disappeared by the time Batman Returns, or had been tempered to the point of it also introducing some much darker elements. So yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer for me. Anne Hathaway was great in The Dark Knight Rises. And any of the Eartha Kitt or Julie Newmar or Lee Merriweather amongst the great Catwomen.
So to me, having watched like Julie Newmar and sort of really sort of tapping into that, I really feel the Catwoman needs to be a little bit crazy. Like she needs to be a bit of a nut job. And to me, it's only Michelle Pfeiffer and Julie Newmar that I think really tap into like genuine crazy. Sure. And as much as I enjoyed Zoe Kravitz in The Batman, she is more just a bit of a streetwise person. And she just she's not unhinged enough. And that's a problem for me.
Yeah.
Effectively, she's playing the Kimmy character, but like in a costume.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right.
But just speaking of Catwoman, like you mentioned Lee Merriweather. So she plays the Catwoman in the 1960s Batman movie and not the TV series.
Right.
But she makes an appearance in a TV series, but not as Catwoman. So she's in a two-parter. I think it's a King Tut episode from memory. Or maybe I'm trying to remember how it plays out. But she plays a character called Lisa Carson. And there's one character of like Lee Merriweather as Catwoman, I think is garbage. Like I do not care for that performance at all. But Lee Merriweather as Lisa Carson, fantastic. And there's one episode, which I think is the main one that she's in. It's basically, I don't think Robin even really makes an appearance in the episode much at all. But the episode, because Batman as a series in the 60s is not consistent. Episodes have different tones. It is all over the place.
It's many things, and it's not consistent.
Yeah. But there's one episode where like it's basically just like a bit of a romantic comedy with Bruce Wayne as a man who just seems to be like dating women in the city, and it's kind of like a very sort of vibrant 60s rom-com sort of a thing. And Lee Merriweather's the love interest Lisa Carson in that, and they have such dynamic chemistry on screen together. It's fantastic. It's just a shame that it's part of this Batman show, which should not be doing what they're doing in this episode. But like, search that one out. Like, it's really something quite special.
All right. Well, we should certainly move on to our second most special Batman moment. Where do you want to go to next?
Look, I'm just doing a bit of technical work here to try to fix the frozen screen where I kind of looked like a car was approaching and I was in an unflattering. Look, where are we? Next thing, I'm going to stick on 66 Batman just for a moment, and I want to talk about the scene, and I don't have the audio here because my machine broke right before we were going to start talking, but there's an exceptional sequence. You can find it on YouTube very easy, and it's probably better with a video. It's Bruce Wayne on the phone. Basically, what's happened is Commissioner Gordon and Chief O'Hara, a character who only exists in the TV series.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
You don't know Chief O'Hara?
No,
you gotta watch him Batman. You'd love it. But the two of them have to get both Batman and Bruce Wayne on a telephone call talking to each other. So they do the thing, which is absolutely how this works. You get two telephone, handsets, turn it around so that they're talking to each other. And so you've got this sequence where they're holding the phones together, where they can kind of hear the conversation happening. But meanwhile, you've got Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson, his youthful ward, in their parlor as Adam West is affecting a phone call conversation from both voices. And he's talking to himself, but with radically different voices and different intonations with everything that he says. It is baffling, just batshit nonsense.
That sounds brilliant. We have to find that. I'm going to try and find that, and I'll put it up on the Facebook page for people to have a look at. That sounds amazing.
Sure, it's fantastic. It's probably the greatest thing that's ever been committed to the screen.
All right, my number two, and I'm bringing the tone down a bit here, but the reveal of Aaron Eckhart's Two-Face character, the injury that he sustained in The Dark Knight when it was released in 2018, few moments from that sort of era of filmmaking gave me a shock as to when he turned over in the hospital bed and his face was very was very not Aaron Eckhart like. Of course, we can't go through this podcast without mentioning the performance of the late Heath Ledger. He won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for his role as the Joker in this film. This had so many great performances in it. Christian Bale, Gary Oldman, Maggie Gyllenhaal had stepped in, Morgan Freeman as well, and Eckhart was great in this part. He's often undervalued as a member of the Batman cinematic universe. But that reveal when he turned his head to the side and his face was all but gone on one side, just thereby creating the Two-Face character, I remember gasping in my seat. It's one of Nolan's great reveals, one of his great moments. So that's my number two.
Yeah, I don't remember ever being shocked by that scene.
Oh, it rocked me. I didn't expect it at the end of my Batman movie. Maybe because I wasn't expecting him to be the Two-Face character, or I had forgotten that his path was headed, that way.
Okay.
But when it turned around, I went, what the hell happened there? It gave me quite a fright.
Yeah. Okay. I'm also going to go something from The Dark Knight. So you mentioned there's one scene in the Batman which is an allusion to the Dark Knight. Like, I'm sure it's not a coincidence that it's there. You've got the interrogation sequence. So in the Batman, it's a scene where Batman, who had been unconscious, is kind of brought into a police headquarters, and it is in an interrogation room of some description.
Yep.
Okay, but the scene where they brought in the Joker and he's sitting there as played by Heath Ledger, and you've just got like that really intense, just terrible lighting that's kind of going on and off, and it's kind of flickering all over the place, and just the intensity of that scene mixed in with the intensity of the music, and they got these great performances where Batman suddenly just turns up in this cell, and it's incredibly just what's even the word? Like, it's stressful.
Yes, it is. Yes, and so much of Heath Ledger's performance was able to tap into that. I will never forget the moment where he, right at the start of the film, where he's introduced to the room full of bad guys and he takes out the pencil, and what he does with the pencil in the guy's face was just rocked my world. I thought, okay, we're in for something special here, and we were. It was a great performance, and that scene that you speak of captured just what a volatile, totally unhinged performance he was able to give. He was great in it.
Yeah, Simon, your turn.
Okay, I'm going a little bit left of center here. I'm going to go with the release of Sega's Batman Returns game. The licensed video games tie-ins from way back when weren't so great, a very mixed bag. In fact, it wasn't even a mixed bag. They were just shit. But way back in 1992, Sega did a platform version, side-to-side scrolling, beat-em-up version of Batman Returns, and it's still one of the great fun licensed games ever made, and it captured the journey that Batman went on, not particularly well, but it was a great side-scrolling Sega game from an era when there wasn't that many great movie tie-ins.
Yeah, like I've got a very vague recollection of that game, and my memory isn't as favorable as yours, but you know.
I'll put some gameplay up on our Facebook page, which I'll turn over a little bit to Batman in the days ahead, so you can get some idea of what we're talking about here. But that was about when my interest in gaming started to wane, and so those early sort of 90s baseball games and soccer games and a couple of the movie tie-in games was really all I played, and I remember Batman Returns very fondly. Number 4.
So there was a cartoon series from a couple of years ago where they decided to drop the dark and gritty Batman for the kids, and instead they decided to embrace a more sort of Adam West style Batman with it was Diedrich Bader, who was in the Drew Carey Show playing the lovable Oswald, and
Jethro in the Beverly Hills Billies movies.
Yes. Also, he has a great line in Office Space that I don't think I can repeat on the podcast. But anyway, he was cast as Batman, and it's a very light, frothy kids cartoon. It was pretty good. Like, there was, quite a bit of fun sort of things going on in it. I haven't seen a lot of it, but I have seen the final episode of the show. And what's interesting about that episode, Simon, is it's about the characters at the entire episode. Is a little bit meta with a mischievous imp that's kind of playing mischief. Batmite, for people who sort of know their Batman.
Yes.
Yep. But at the very end of the episode, they're all in the Batcave and they're having a goodbye party to Batman because they're all acknowledging that this is the final episode. Okay. And Batman does something really, really unique in that he turns to the camera and addresses the audience and thanks them for watching. And I've got some audio.
This is really it.
Yeah, looks like. At least you can say you had a good run.
A great run. And until we meet again, boys and girls, know that wherever evil lurks, in all its myriad forms, I'll be there with the hammers of justice to fight for decency and defend the innocent. Good night.
And it's kind of lovely.
That is nice. I'll have to check it out. I didn't know. I mean, I remembered it, but I'd never seen it. So that's one worth picking out for.
You can find it on YouTube pretty easily.
Good one. Okay, so my number 4 is the moment when Batman and Superman learn each other's identities. It was in a 1997 animated version called the Batman Superman movie World's Finest. The basic setup is, you remember it? The basic setup is very simple. The Joker, who's voiced by the wonderful Mark Hamill, travels to Metropolis, contracted by Lex Luthor to kill Superman. Batman follows him, and that's where he first runs into Superman. this was a really interesting sort of play on the two superheroes getting together, not really liking each other. There's a sequence where Superman uses his X-ray vision, excuse me, to see through the bat mask to learn that it is in fact Bruce Wayne who is the Batman. But Batman gets his own back. He leaves a tracer on Superman's cape, and it tracks Superman all the way back to the Daily Planet building and to the apartment of one Clark Kent. And there's a great scene where Clark walks to the window, looks into the distance, and there's Batman sitting on top of a building who gives him a bit of a wave and a bit of a sign off. So now he's evened things up. So it was a great moment. I kind of got into the animated Batman, Justice League, those sort of animated movies for a while there. And that was a moment that I remember as being pretty cool, especially with Mark Hamill doing the voice of the Joker. I think that's what originally sort of drew me to these films, but that was a terrific bit of late 90s animation.
Yeah, the last one I just want to mention is Batman 1989, so the first of the Tim Burton movies. There's a sequence where the Joker goes to the art gallery. Well, I think it's actually technically a museum.
Yes.
And he gets creative and, starts doing some, pretty serious vandalism to all of the art. What I really like about this scene is it's actually a very explicit homage to the 60s Batman. And when you watch as much 60s Batman as I did in such a short time period, when you go back and watch the 89 Batman, you realize how many scenes of that are actually very direct references to the old Batman TV show. But none of them is as overt as this Joker scene in the art gallery, which actually harkens back to a two-part episode called Pop Goes the Joker and Flop Goes the Joker. And this was very much leaning into the Andy Warhol pop art idea that underpins the Batman TV show, but it's very much about them making fun of contemporary pop artists of the time. And it's very 60s.
Wow,
but there's something so glorious about watching them recreate it effectively in this 89 Batman movie.
It's interesting you bring up Andy Warhol, because Andy Warhol did a major art installation using the Batman character, unlicensed. He just did it. It's only ever been seen at his exhibitions in the sort of mid 60s, early 70s. And God, I wish I could remember the name of it. I will find out for it and let the people know. But it's yeah. So Andy Warhol was right into the whole pop culture scene that Batman created.
Yeah, Simon, you got one final Batman moment?
Two quick points. I get to my fifth one, and it's really the most obvious one we should have brought up right at the start. But I do want to point out that we're not giving Ben Affleck's Batman any kind of play in this whole Batman episode. We haven't mentioned any of the Zack Snyder stuff yet, and maybe we'll get to that in a minute. But you got a thought on that?
Look, I don't have the problems with Man of Steel that a lot of people have, but
nor do I.
There's issues with it. But like, that's the only one of the Zack Snyder Batman, Superman, Justice League films that I really think is much top.
Okay. All right. So my number 5 moment, it's the Batusi. It was a dance performed by Batman after being drugged by Molly in a What a Way to Go nightclub. Now, contrary to popular belief, the Batusi technically only appears in High Diddle Riddle, the episode, though it's briefly referenced at the start of his dance in the Pharaohs in a Rut. Oh boy, the research I did on this segment. So the Batusi, which was a send-up of the Watusi dance craze at the time, still remains one of the great TV moments, well, frankly, ever. You can have your moon landing, but as long as we've got the Batusi, then it's really the most important thing.
Yeah, so that's actually the very first episode of Batman 66.
Wow. They led with that. Good for them.
That episode is surprisingly darker than you would expect. Like, it's goofy and it's a little bit of nonsense, but they certainly played a bit darker than you think they would, and they certainly get a bit brighter in other episodes. But
and that was the Screen Watching Bat-ACULAR Middle Bit from Podcasting's Dynamic Duo. Thanks for listening.
Okay, Simon, we like to wind out the week with a look at the week ahead and some birthdays and anniversaries, but do we have any week ahead business this week?
Well, I want to mention a couple of movies that are debuting on streaming. On Netflix is Against the Ice. I love these big sort of ice flow adventure stories. This stars Nikolai Coster-Waldau and Charles Dance. It's all set in 1909. Two explorers fight to survive after they've left behind on a Danish expedition in ice-covered Greenland. That's worth watching on Netflix. And also out on Disney Plus Star, we're still going to figure out how to say that, is a movie called Fresh. Now, this is a very unusual show. It starts off like a movie. It starts off like a romantic sort of comedy, a very sweet romantic story about how Daisy Edgar Jones is falling for Sebastian Stan. But then at about the half-hour mark, it takes a very nasty turn and turns into quite the commentary on toxic masculinity, how women are being treated as commodities by men. I don't want to give away any of the secrets of this plot, but Fresh is one of the darkest, one of the funniest, one of the more unpleasant things you'll find on Disney Plus this year until they re-release Song of the South. So it's called Fresh on Disney Plus.
Song of the South never getting a re-release.
I know. Any returning series, any newer returning series you want to mention?
So TV shows I want to mention, and if we weren't doing the BAT special on this, like some of these would probably get some proper reviews, but the things to probably look out for is The Dropouts, which is the Elizabeth Holmes series. That's going to be debuting on Disney Plus, I believe, this coming weekend. So give a look out for that. You've got The Boys Presents Diabolical, which is an anthology series of animated shorts around the Boys TV program. What else have we got here, Simon? We've got... So I was just looking for Winning Time, and it's not on my rundown sheet here, but I'm pretty certain that it's debuting. We've got The Return of the Circus for season 7, which is the quasi-documentary look at politics in the US. There's Shining Vale, which is a Courtney Cox-led horror comedy, which looks pretty interesting, and I think that was coming to Binge in Australia.
Okay.
That's
a couple of ones that I noticed. Yeah, The Guardians of Justice is coming to Netflix this week. This is about the alien superhero Marvelous Man, who leaves emissions up to both his bitter violence Lieutenant Nighthawk and idealistic the Speed to stop nuclear war. Looks very strange, but sounds like a lot of fun. Stars Denise Richards in a voice role, and Pieces of Her, which I didn't know anything about, but listen to this cast: Toni Collette, David Wenham, Bella Heathcote. That comes to Netflix from March 4. A Saturday afternoon trip to the mall suddenly explodes into violence, and a young woman's conception of her mother is forever changed. So with that sort of cast, I don't know why there's not more buzz about it. I haven't heard about this, but it's called Pieces of Her on Netflix from March 4.
Pieces of Her, that's got a little bit of buzz around it.
Oh, has it? I haven't picked up on that. That's definitely worth watching. Big fan of Bella Heathcote. I think she's a terrific actress.
I just want to give a bit of a heads up to people that one of the things they probably haven't done is watched a really interesting show that's on Amazon Prime Video called Upload. It debuted probably about 1.5 to 2 years ago. And the premise of it is, and it's really topical at the moment because you got the metaverse is something which people are discussing now in a way they weren't when this first series sort of debuted. It's the idea that when people die in this sort of futuristic world, that's, 15 years from now-ish, people can have their memories, like their sort of sense of self and identity, uploaded into a virtual reality environment where they can live on in heaven, but still be able to communicate with the world as it's ongoing. And that's the conceit of the show. They take it a little bit sort of further than that, but really interesting sort of funny comedy. It's from creator of the US Office, whose name has just dropped out of my mind entirely. Greg Daniels.
Oh, Greg Daniels. Okay. Yep.
Greg Daniels, not sure. I don't think show's involved in either production. But yeah, really funny program. I found it a little off-putting for the first 1 or 2 episodes, but once I clicked into the vibe of it, I was very much in. Second season of that debuts next weekend, but I think there's so many people that have missed the first season that it's probably worthwhile. Check it out, give it a bit of a sample, see if it's for you, and if it is, then you'll probably blitz through the first season quite readily throughout this week, ready in time for that second season's drop next week.
What's it called again? Sorry, as I often do, I wasn't listening to what you said at the start there. What was it called?
Upload.
Okay, I want to watch that because, and I don't mean to get too deep and meaningful here, but one of the great tragedies of losing someone, of the passing of someone away, is the loss of memory. And I find any of those sort of fantastical speculative shows that speak about capturing memories and storing memories or wisdom and being able to use someone's intelligence further into the future, or being able to recall the memories of, rather than just having it lost to the ether with the passing of with dying, I think is a Great idea. So I'll be watching that. Upload sounds like
it's not quite that. What it's actually interesting, because when a person is uploaded into one of these heaven environments, they're able to just keep on living on.
Okay.
Like it's not as though like it's just the memory of them that lives on, but really it's them. So they evolve and change as people and go on. But what the show is really particularly interested in is the real world political, financial implications of that. So what rights does the person have when they're being uploaded into the cloud? Because these are corporations that are running this sort of environment. So for all of eternity, you are more or less at the whims of whoever signed the contract to allow you to be uploaded into the cloud.
No,
Okay, so you have to be nice to your family. You have to maintain those sorts of relationships. Otherwise, they could just turn you off and you don't exist anymore. So it kind of plays around with that. And also, if you're a person who doesn't have the means to live in the nice version of heaven, but instead you're living in one of the like sub levels, like what sort of quality of life you expected to have, and what happens when your family is too cheap to pay for like the extra data that you need to be able to live a sustaining life. Like there's lots of interesting elements to do with the practicalities of that kind of environment. And that's where the show really excels. It's a really interesting program.
Upload on, again, I wasn't listening. What channel is it on?
It's on Prime.
On Prime. Okay, I'll be watching that. Now, for the histories and birthdays this week, we're doing a special Batman edition. I've thrown the format to the wind to some extent, and we're going to have a look at significant moments in the history of Batman and the Batman universe. So let's go right back to the start. In history, March 30, 1939, Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, makes his first appearance in the Detective Comics number 27, and that launched the whole Batman craziness. You want to go next?
In April 24, 1940, the series Batman debuted, and that had the Joker and Catwoman making their first appearances.
In the Batman #1 comic. So he first appeared in DC number 27, then he got his own comic, Batman #1. Then let's jump ahead 9 years to May 26, 1949, and the episodic series The New Adventures of Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder is shown in theaters. Almost 4 hours worth of serialized Batman adventures played by Robert Lowry was in the lead role there.
Now, for Australian listeners, I believe that show is available on Tubi, Tubi. Wow. If you want to check that out. I'm sure it's probably on YouTube as well, I'm sure. And I think there's 2 Batman serials from back in the day, but basically that's all just sort of pretense for January 12, 1966, in the greatest year of television ever. And I can explore that a bit further if you want, Simon. The Batman TV show debuted with Adam West, Burt Ward playing the iconic.
So let me get this straight. They released the TV series, and then in the same year, they cut together a Batman movie, or they made an entirely new storyline for the Batman movie. How did that work?
They made an entire movie in addition. So because the show debuted so early in the year, they were able to say it was an immediate success, and then started working really quickly on getting the Batman movie together. And when you watch the Batman movie, you begin to realize just how quick it was that film came together. Because, boy, that film, not very good. Outside of a couple of iconic scenes, like it is a rough hour and a half to 2 hours worth of viewing.
The shark biting the leg, that is hilarious. I do still laugh at that incredibly.
Yeah, but that's the only thing we're laughing at. Try to think about many other funny scenes throughout that film, Simon.
There's many. So let's jump ahead quite a few years to August 31st, 1989. Now, that was when Tim Burton's Batman premiered with Michael Keaton in the lead role. We should point out that this came along at a time when there were no superhero movies. Superman had had his day. Comic books and comic book properties were not seen as the big ticket item. So Tim Burton's Batman was seen as quite the roll of the dice by Warner Brothers Studios. And what it did was it changed the landscape. Once again, it became a blockbuster hit. It became an IP sort of property that was that led to soundtracks and merchandising, the likes of which hadn't been seen since the Star Wars and Superman days. So it was a real big deal, the Tim Burton Batman movie, August 31, 1989.
Sorry, I'm doing some math at the moment, so just bear with me a moment. Oh gosh, I just lost track of the thing. We were talking about how the Batman TV show had a movie come out the same year.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, Simon, that this is the 60s, where a TV series wasn't just 20 episodes a year. Sometimes they did quite a bit more. So in the 1966 year that Batman was at its peak, and that was absolutely when it's at its peak, hit 67 and things start sliding down dramatically. And one of the reasons why that slide probably happens is because there was a lot of Batman in 1966.
Really?
There were 34 episodes in that first season. There was the movie that came out in the summer. So just a couple of weeks after the first season had finished, you've got the movie debuting in cinemas.
Wow.
And then the show comes back in September, as series does. Okay, from September 7, 2 episodes a week. So this is probably about like 14, 16 episodes.
Yeah.
That you add on top. So like that's getting close to about 50 episodes of Batman.
That's
in 1 year.
extraordinary when you think about it. So was Batman the movie a hit? Did people decide that, well, I haven't seen enough on my television, I'm now going to get up and go to the movies to watch even more of it?
I think it did pretty well. Like not amazing, but like well enough.
That's amazing. Good for them. And finally, finishing off in the history, February 24, 2010, an unrestored copy of that original DC number 27 sells for over $1 million. And then on November 19, 2020, 10 years later, a copy of the same DC number 27 hit $1.5 million. And these even weren't mint condition. They were graded as about a 7 out of 10, which is apparently what the auctioneers do with this sort of merchandise. And it still hit 1.5 million at the auction table. So Batman's been around for a long time and turned over a lot of the old bat moolah.
Oh, look, absolutely. Now we don't have a bat-related sting, but I know you love hearing this, Simon.
No, not happy birthday. No, not that. Please, no, not happy birthday.
Okay, we've got some birthdays to celebrate this week. So we've got the birthday of Bruce Wayne, who was, as per your notes here, first debuted in the 30s, and they said he was born on April 7. In the animated series The Batman, which is a not very good cartoon, they say that Bruce's birthday is in October, and Frank Miller, who wrote the iconic Batman Year One and Batman The Dark Knight Returns, says his birthday's in November. So
really
when is it?
Who knows? I don't know. I really wish I thought this through when I decided to do the Batman Returns, because there's all these different universe and parallels and relaunches of comics and all this sort of stuff. And it drove me absolutely mad. The only date I could find for Commissioner Gordon was February 27, 1966. Now that has to be from one of the re-releases, because he's been in the comics for a lot longer than that, hasn't he?
Oh yeah, he's been like, pretty early. And I'm not quite sure exactly when he comes in, because the thing with these characters you have to remember is that, and this is particularly the case with Superman, most of the supporting cast from Superman, a lot of the iconography like Kryptonite and the Daily Planet, like these actually come from radio serials and animated shows rather than the comics themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where Gordon comes in. So I think he's a comics character from the very beginning, but don't take my word on that entirely.
And then Selena Kyle, aka Selena Calabrese, aka Catwoman, she was either born March 15 or April 25, depending on who you listen to or what sort of multiverse you want to go down. So that's an interesting one.
Then you've got Richard Grayson, aka Dick Grayson, aka Rick Grayson, and his birthday is apparently on March 20th. And a birth date that I think is a complete missed opportunity. The Joker, according to a 1976 DC calendar, has his birthday on August 1st and his transformation into the Joker occurring on July 12th. Wow, now, a few things to note there. Different versions of the Joker have the Joker as having different experiences and whatnot. But I don't understand why the Joker doesn't have a birthday on April 1st.
Boom, right there. There's your missed opportunity. That would be funny.
Baffling.
Yeah. Is that the end of our Batman podcast, the official screen watching Batman indulgence?
It would almost have to be.
Okay, let's sign off then.
Okay, folks, this has been Screen Watching. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Dan Barrett. You can find me on Twitter at the Dan Barrett. You can start your day with my free newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching, and you can find that at alwaysbewatching.com. And it's got the big stories in TV, streaming, and film. And on Friday, you've got the Always Be Streaming newsletter, which recounts the big shows that launched that very week.
I'm on the Twitter at Simon R. Foster1. Read my words at screen-space.net. The Screen Watching Facebook page. I'll get a few of this Batman-y stuff that we've been talking about up there in the days ahead. And do go to our Screen Watching YouTube channel. You can see our interview with the guys who made Blind Ambition, which is a terrific documentary that's in cinemas this week. Won the Audience Award at the Sydney Film Festival. That's at our YouTube channel, Screen Watching.
Yeah, you can also follow Screen Watching via your favorite podcast app. Load it up now, hit the follow button, and you get new episodes just like that.
Wow. What's going to be our next big special edition of Screen Watching? What comes out? Is it a Jurassic Park one? Can we do a Jurassic Park one? I'd love to do that.
Oh, look, we can absolutely do that. Is there an anniversary coming up for like Deep Throat or anything?
Jesus, Dan, you caught me off guard then.
5 favorite moments from Deep Throat.
Well, one in particular. All right. So that's the end of the Screen Watching Batman podcast. Bye-bye.
I've never seen that movie. Folks, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week, supposedly. I knew you'd dance to that. What a mistake.
See ya.
See ya.